Hey, Heather.
Yes, Amy.
Did you know that approximately 1 billion plastic toothbrushes end up in U.S. landfills every year?
That's a lot of plastic.
It sure is. Now, if you're like Heather and me, you're always looking for easy ways to reduce your carbon footprint. And when I say easy, I'm not kidding. Here's one of the easiest ways I know. Just switch to a biodegradable toothbrush. Earthmania bamboo toothbrushes are made from premium, biodegradable, and highly sustainable bamboo with densely packed, ultra-soft, BPA-free bristles. So they're safe for everyone, including kids and people with sensitive gums.
With Earthmania, you get a fantastic clean for your entire mouth, and you can feel good about helping out the environment. They come in a 4-pack biodegradable cardboard box, not plastic packaging like most toothbrushes. And just like an old-school plastic toothbrush, you should switch out your Earthmania bamboo toothbrush every 3 months. So a 4-pack box will last you an entire year.
Also, did you know that bamboo is naturally antimicrobial? So a bamboo brush is less likely to harbor germs and mold like their plastic counterparts.
I'm sold! I can't think of a reason not to switch to Earthmania.
Same! And for our Casting Notice listeners, Earthmania has a deal, and who doesn't love a deal?
I love a deal.
Yeah, go to earthmania.com and enter the code CastingNotice at checkout for 20% off your entire order. That's www.earthmania.com, discount code, which is 2 words, Casting Notice.
Earthmania premium bamboo toothbrushes. Love the earth, love your smile.
Hey, it's me, Amy. Thanks for joining us. Today, we have a really special guest. It's one of my favorite social media stars and just an all-around great guy. You know him probably on TikTok as Your Korean Dad, and he's also on Instagram at Nick Cho. So without further ado, let's sit down and talk with Nick Cho. Yeah, so like today we have our amazing guest with us today on Casting Notice Podcast. This is Nick Cho, and I would say the majority of people probably know you as Your Korean Dad. Yes, right? But yeah, Nick and I met in person. We had emailed like a couple years ago. Really briefly.
Early pandemic.
Because Disney Channel had asked Aubrey to name like was it a Korean American or an Asian American, like to nominate someone who's sort of like I don't know if we're calling them heroes or whatever.
Something like that.
Something like that. And I was like, Aubrey, can you think of someone? She's like, no. I mean, she was, a little bit younger then. So she was like, I don't know. I'm like, well, Disney is asking you, can you just think of someone? And then she was kind of like, she's like, well, I don't know. Like all the Asians I know are like my age or whatever. And then I think like maybe you popped up in her TikTok feed. She already knew
She's
who
like,
you
find
were.
this guy. Can we leave me alone?
Good enough. Can we just use him? He's Korean. But she was like, oh, how about this guy? Like, she's like, have you seen his videos? And I had not. And she had seen several of your videos at that point. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is amazing. I love this. And so she was like, yeah, like, let's nominate Nick. And then I messaged Nick to just like kind of get an A-OK. And he's like, well, 1 million people already nominated me. Thanks.
Oh, come on.
We're like, well, we're still just going to use you because you can't think of anyone else. But that's kind of how Nick came onto my radar. But we actually just met in person recently at a little movie premiere on the Paramount lot. And it was like, here we are. And our kids met. Well, one of kid. You have 2 kids. I have 1 kid.
Yeah. It's been such like a fun kind of thing. I mean, I got to imagine the sort of pre-internet equivalent is like if you have a pen pal that you meet in real life. But like social media is like pen pals times like 1 million, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's been really great. It was great to meet you, and it's great to be able to connect in this way.
Yeah, this is cool. And like I also am learning that, I think because I, obviously like did a dive on you and your murky past. No, I was kidding. But it did say somewhere I saw, like probably on your Wikipedia or something, that it said that you had a podcast, but you mentioned it again this morning. What was your podcast about?
So my prior career before being like a social media person or entertainment sort of adjacent person is I was a specialty coffee industry expert for like 20 years.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's sort of, that was my kind of life's work. But then through the beginning of the pandemic and when TikTok started taking off, I kind of developed this Your Korean Dad persona, and it's become sort of my new career now, my new career focus. But I still make coffee every morning, most of the time. And I also I got a coffee on the way over here, and I didn't like it.
Okay, are you going to say where from?
No. But as it cooled, like the flavor kind of fell apart. It got really bitter. Which
So you're like a true like coffee guy.
Well,
Like, you
it's
really know your stuff.
I'm an expert, but it's not about making me happy. I'm a proxy for what I consider the general public. So this is again where some of my really good friends from the coffee industry, they've told me like, we understand this transition into this Korean dad kind of persona. A lot of people in the coffee industry who don't know me very well don't understand like what happened.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden it's like Nick was this figure, you know, teaching and speaking around the world and doing this and that. And all of a sudden he's like on TikTok. Like what the hell happened? But for me, it was never about like what I like about coffee. It was about trying to, this sounds so corny and sort of overblown, but like
corn.
a certain kind of like speaking truth to power and really sort of fighting for what I thought was right for coffee, whether it's the social justice issues, you know, on multiple levels, or just like make your coffee better, like stop doing stuff that is in some ways like just serving your own whims or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so if you ever have a cup of coffee and you're like, why does this taste this way? This doesn't taste good. It's like they actually don't know what they're doing. I'm gonna say.
Do you have
Interesting.
Do you have a test? So I love coffee. My husband and I, he's way more like, I think
Oh,
you
her
should meet
husband
Bobby,
made me
Nick,
a
because I
really
think
cool
you would
drink, yeah.
Yeah, I think you would get along very well. But he's obsessed with coffee. But I have a test. Like I always get an Americano any new place I go.
That's what I'm drinking right now.
And if the Americano is good, then I trust that you can do other stuff well. But if the Americano is bad, I don't want the coffee from there anymore.
What
You
makes
think-
for a good or a bad Americano for you, Heather?
It can't be too, I have to still feel the robustness of the coffee. Often when it's bad, it's cold for some reason and overly watered down.
Okay.
And I want to feel it to be rich. I want it to be like scalding almost. You know, I need you to burn my tongue off if I drink too recklessly. And I really want
Reckless
the bean flavor to be good because I don't put cream and sugar in my coffee. I am a straight black coffee drinker. So the beans have to be of really good, flavorful quality. And if you're using junk beans, like certain places that maybe start with star and end with bucks, I don't really want it.
Well, and also like you just saw my kitchen, but I have like 3 different coffee machines.
I saw that.
I know. I'm sure you did a quick scan. I was like, there's a Keurig here. Bye.
No.
By the way, I don't really use that Keurig. It was given to me for free, and I'm saving it to put in the guest house.
I have a free Keurig too at home, so it's okay.
Okay, yeah, it's
I have a
literally
Keurig,
to
yeah.
put in the guest house later. So it's just sitting there taking up a ton of counter space. But I got that Illy machine. Am I even saying it right? Is it Illy? The Italian?
Illy, sure.
Illy.
From Trieste.
See. So I got that at a school raffle, and I'm like, well, you know, whatever. I'll just put in some money for this. It was the only thing that I would actually want to take home because they had other products to raffle, like to put your money into. So anyway, I won that, and I actually really like it.
Yeah.
And I make an Americano with it every morning now. And I bought like 1,000 pods for it and stuff. But I'm a lazy coffee maker. Anyway, we could talk about coffee all morning. That's
I
not
know.
really
We
why
started
we're
out
here,
talking
but yeah.
about. We started out talking about my coffee podcast.
I also have an
history.
espresso maker. I mean,
Now it
yes.
feels like we're doing my old coffee podcast.
Right, like
but just
didn't
with
I
you
say
two.
your podcast dreams are going to come true today? I do not lie, Nick Cho. I do not lie. Okay, so let's get to Heather. Where do you want to start? Because Heather definitely had some questions, and well, let's just start with this. Let's start at the very beginning. Okay.
Which I did see you love Sound of Music, and I want to know if that's a Korean thing because my mom loves Sound of Music.
I also was like my top 3 movies.
Oh, it's so
She
good.
tells me-
So good.
She told me a story. So my mom emigrated to America probably in 78 or 79 before
Your
I was
mom's
born,
Korean.
after my sister was born. My parents met during Vietnam. My dad was stationed in Korea. And she told me a story when Sound of Music came out, they weren't allowed to see it. So they would tear off their, patches of their school and their student number on their uniforms. And she snuck into Sound of Music to watch it because it was considered risque for the students. And her
Oh, like
teacher
kids
happened to
weren't allowed to
catch
see it.
him. Yeah.
I wonder
Her
why.
teacher caught him and she got in big trouble for it, but she loves
Adult
Sound of Music.
situations. right?
That sexy
I guess
folk
so.
dance that's like the sexiest when the captain was so fucking hot. Like, like, you know the scene I'm talking about. Like,
I do know the scene you're talking
where
about.
they do the folk dance and Maria gets all like,
Oh.
and she blushes and like,
I
yeah.
must have had a wicked childhood.
Oh, you know that they
yeah.
wrote
Yeah.
that just for the movie. That wasn't in the
Yeah.
original. But like,
the
yeah,
best.
it's a great, it's such a good
Yeah.
movie. Oh man.
My parents took
That's
us on a
really-
terrible family trip to Utah. My mom reenacted the opening scene to Sound of Music over the hills, like spinning. And I was like,
and
"Good
what a
God."
shame we didn't have smartphones back then.
Right.
Seriously.
That would have been
because
viral.
I wanna
But what do
see
you
that.
love about Sound of Music? Is it just the family components or the overcoming oppression?
I mean, I think about this sort of stuff a lot, and I think it's really relevant to your podcast and talking about identity and things like that. You know, there's as much as a lot of us, I think, people like us and our friends are really kind of we abhor and kind of are horrified by this whole like MAGA, like Make America Great Again kind of thing. You know, there is something to like the classics, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is something to like what we consider to be like a more innocent sort of time. And I mean, for me, it's funny that you told the story about not being allowed to see it, because for me, like Sound of Music is like some of the most sort of wholesome content that ever sort of hit, the global audience. Like it's beautiful. And I mean, Julie Andrews is close to a goddess that exists, I think, in culture.
I wonder though, like it's just because because my mom loves it so much. You'll find out later. I have many reasons why. I often reverse my opinions on things just because she likes it. So I very deliberately grew up being like, I don't like this musical. It's boring. It's this. It's that. And I've had an appreciation later in life. I played a nun in the high school version that we did.
Aw,
but like,
I need
I
pictures of that,
deliberately
too.
would like revolt against the film because I could not stand liking something she liked.
This is not your mother's Sound of Music.
No.
Right.
Well, and just like we can really get into the nitty gritty here, but Heather and I both grew up with, shall we say, difficult moms.
Yes.
And hers, I think, like more in a like narcissistic way. My mom like was more like, she just passed in November, but like a more of
I'm
a
so sorry.
well, she was anyway.
Yeah.
She honestly, like, this is weird. I haven't publicly talked about this, like, just as friends and stuff, but I mean, I haven't felt sad about it at all. We were not close. And like, but my mom wasn't a narcissist, but I think she was very, she projected a lot of her own self hatred onto me specifically as the only girl in the family. And so like that's another thing that we kind of have talked about, is just like having difficult moms. And like, it's interesting that you kind of were just like, everything you like I'm gonna hate, but like, even though my mom kind of like forced music on me and stuff, I ended up majoring in it, and I'm still, singing.
You majored in music?
Yeah, I have
Oh,
a
I did
degree
too.
in
I did
music.
too.
And you did really?
Yeah, I studied music.
Oh
in
my
college.
God, we should have like prepared a song or something.
We should.
Yeah, I went to a conservatory and everything, and my mom like used to force me to sing in school talent shows and stuff like that, and at church. But I mean, you've kind of like hinted to like at having maybe like not a great relationship with parents in some of your videos. I don't know. I mean, I'm just like guessing, but that's something we wanted to ask you about, was like, so the whole you're Korean dad, and I'm sure you've been asked about this like ad nauseum, but did that come out of a place of like you wanting to, well, I mean, you can just tell us where that came out of, but it was such a, because you really like blew up during the pandemic, and I've talked with Aubrey about it. Like, it's so fascinating and amazing to me that it really hit home with so many different types of people across the board, and like wondering if like you had anticipated that or wanted that to happen. But I mean, I think many of us related to it as Korean Americans, Asian Americans, Aubrey being someone who doesn't really have her dad super present in her life. Like, I mean, I'm sure you all the time get messages from kids who are like, oh, I didn't have this type of dad, or I'm Korean, or I just didn't have a dad, or whatever. So yeah, like all over the place, it really hit a nerve, like, and in the hearts of like so many different types of people. Did you anticipate that happening, and or then where did that come from you, like just creating that?
No, it's a good question, and it is one hand, it is one that I get a lot. I have my sort of canned response, my short answer to the question. I'm not going to give you that. I'm going to give you the better answer, like the more sort of exclusive.
Exclusive on Casting Notice.
I mean, I think about these. How should I put this? There's an intersection of a bunch of different things, which to me is like, for instance, we talk about parenting, and you were talking about, your mother's. I think that, parenting is about leadership, and leadership is in many ways, kind of about parenting in terms of perspective and philosophy. I think that for the people who are like, well, I gave you a roof over your head and 3 square meals a day, type of sort of sustenance sort of philosophy people are missing the point. To me, that's like the manager or like, the boss at work equivalent of like, well, my job is to tell you what to do and your job is to do it,
because I said so.
That
kind of parenting.
Exactly. And, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I've run cafes and coffee companies for the last, 20 years before I started on TikTok. And I have a lot to say about management. I haven't, being in the industry, I've met a lot of fellow entrepreneurs and business owners. And I've met almost none that I think are actually good at what they do as far as like managing people.
I believe it.
And it's one of those things where, someone else might be like, what are you talking about? Like, everyone has bosses, everyone. Yes, that's the same thing as parents. Like, everyone has parents, and there are very few that actually, really. And so to me, so many of these things are about understanding your full responsibility. And even if you can't live up to all of those, at least like acknowledge it and really, there's that. So then another facet of it for me is I think that one of the big sort of flaws in American culture is that Americans, we find it hard to carry more than one idea at the same time in a way that like others might call paradox or like things like that, right? Like things that don't seem to go together can both be true, but they are true.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is they are true. And so I think about that a lot. It's not like, there's the cliche about it's not black or white, it's shades of gray. It's not shades of gray. It's actually like the full spectrum of things, it can be true in different ways. It's very actually complex. And trying to reduce it down to like, well, I'm right and they're wrong type of thing is, frankly, it's just a lie. It's delusional.
Oh, it'll be the death of us. It's killing us right now.
Yeah, it's very embedded in American culture.
Yes, it is.
And I think
we're just talking about this with Aubrey.
Yeah?
Literally, yes. That like we live in this society right now, and it's gotten so extreme of like, this is one way and this is one, and there the two shall meet, right? I said, things exist. They coincide and they exist side by side. They sometimes intersect, and they can both be true, and they can both happen. Like we have to make space for all these ideas in the world. You can't just have one or the other. And especially like for me, like how you were talking about, like to you, like parenting is a lot like managing or whatever. Like, I mean, for me, like I've talked a lot with Aubrey about, and some other parenting friends. Like for me, I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that Aubrey and I have a really close relationship. We really like each other and love each other. You can tell when you're together. Yeah. I mean, and I say like a lot of parent friends, I'm like, you can poo-poo this if you want, but she's my best friend. And like, well, I don't need to be my kid's friend. I need to be their parent. And I'm like, you can be their friend and their parent.
Sure.
Both of those things can happen. Right. And I said, because at the end of the day, she is going to be an adult, and hopefully we'll both be adults in this world, and I want her to still like me. And really what that comes down to me, parenting to me is it's another relationship. I have a relationship with you now. Yeah. I have a relationship with Heather. I have a relationship with my daughter. And I want all of those relationships to work, right? So, like, I don't really see myself as a parent, like, being it's a different type of relationship, of course. I'm not your parent. But, like, really, like, we want our relationships to work in the same way. We want them to be functional. We want to be able to like each other. We want to be able to communicate openly. And so that's how I approach parenting. And it doesn't mean that I just indulge her so that she'll like me. Not at all. That's not what I mean by like she's my friend. I want her, and like people are like, I don't need my kid to like me. I'm like, I want my kid to like me. Like, why don't you want your kid to like you? That's so bizarre. I'm like, I really want my kid to like me, but that means having a functional relationship where we communicate openly.
Did you talk about at all with Aubrey why people are like that? Why people are so like eager to rush to the black or white solution?
A
or
little
answer?
bit. What do you think of that? I mean, because there's.
Yeah, I have a lot of yeah.
You're like,
I didn't mean to segue myself, but
no, of
yeah.
course.
No, it's okay.
That's why you're here. We want to
I think it's embedded in the DNA of American culture.
I think it is too.
I think that it actually, and I've never seen anyone talk about this. I always want to imagine that out there is some literature or some work that's done on this sort of specific topic. But when you think about the history of America, of genocide and slavery, that it makes sense that the culture then adopts this idea that, yeah, those things are terrible, but it had to happen because look at all these wonderful things that we have.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a lie. That's a delusion that we carry. It's not actually true, because that really and it informs, you know, our American form of like white supremacy and, you know, all the sort of social problems that we have. Is like all these things, we can sort of erase them from our little like mental whiteboard or cultural whiteboard, because we have these benefits that make it all worthwhile, and therefore it's just gone, you know, like whether it's homelessness or, you know, just different forms of repression. Those are just things that have to happen, you know, whereas the truth of the matter is, like, if we actually saw each other as real people, like everyone did, then instead of this sort of like, well, that's too bad, but, you know, too bad for them type of attitude, it would be too bad for us.
Yeah.
You know, what's going on with us? What's going on with each other? You know, and most, I think, cultures in the world that are a little bit more monocultural or more monoethnic, there's a big sense of, we have to take care of each other or else we don't have anything. Everything falls apart. Whereas this country is based on, we don't have to take care of each other because it's everyone out for themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and I think that sort of in a cyclical way, then you end up having this like black or white type of mentality and an inability to carry multiple sort of, you know, paradoxic things.
Yes, and then
at the
accused
same
of
time.
being a socialist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so this is where things get
Such a
fun
big
because
thing.
Amy and I disagree on a lot of topics, but we're very friendly still about it. And, you know, growing up in a household that was very half Korean, half American, because my family's been here, rumor has it, since Jamestown. To me, what I found about Korean culture, the way my mom described it and portrayed it, was so oppressive, was so like, you are required. Like, I remember my mom telling me once, she was crying, and she said, "Why aren't you crying too?" I said, "Why would I cry? I feel bad that you're upset, but why?" She's like, "Because my grief needs to be your grief." And I said, "I'm not doing this Joy Luck Club bullshit. I'm not here to absorb your pain. Like, I can empathize with your pain, but I should not be forced to feel your pain and be in it." And that was kind of her mentality the whole time, of just, you know, an expectation of, you will take care of me when I'm older. You will do this. You will have compliance, because the Korean culture is such a deferment to the parents and the elders of society. And so honorific. While my dad was like, you know, I'd really like to have a great relationship with you. I'd really like to, you know, be open and have a loving relationship, but you got to do your thing. You got to live your life. You got to be who you want to be and what you believe in, except an actor. Don't be that. So to me, it's so funny, because you talk about the monoculture of like taking care of each other. And yet I grew up viewing it as being forced into a position I didn't want to be in if I didn't have to be.
It's both of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And again, like you
those
said,
are
it
like
could be
two
two things.
feelings
Yeah.
that both exist.
Right. It's both of those things. It's all of those things. You know, you're not wrong for feeling that way, because that was like a little glimpse into like a wider culture, and that's one of the things. I mean, I have that experience too from my parents, is getting these glimpses, you know, into a culture, and also not understanding or not knowing or being able to necessarily trust whether or not how authentic is this to Korean culture, and how much of this is just your bias or your sort of, bent kind of thing too, and that's one of those things that's both beautiful and sad about, kind of growing up in this sort of cultural context, right, that we all have, is like getting these different glimpses of different sorts. And it's like opening a box, like a puzzle, like a 500-piece puzzle, and then there's like 20 pieces in there. And you long to know sort of what the complete puzzle looks like, and you long to sort of have all the pieces to put together and create a full picture. But instead, like, you open the box and there's like 20 pieces of one puzzle and then 15 pieces of what's clearly a different puzzle.
My puzzle has like one piece in it. My box.
Yeah, it might be.
I think that's what's so interesting about your Korean dad is I follow you. But there were times where I would have to skip past your videos because it was in such conflict with my mom saying, you should be grateful you don't have a Korean father. You should be grateful because Korean dads are like this. My Korean dad was like, and I had a terrible grandfather. He was an abusive alcoholic. I didn't know him. He died months after I was born. But my mom had a terrible life with him. I will give her that she experienced extreme trauma at the hands of her father.
I'm so
and we
sorry.
can discuss post, Korean War, what it did to the men, what it did to the society. But that always stuck with me, this idea of you should be so grateful. And then I would watch her videos and it would make me I'm going to tear up, and I'm so sorry. It would make me so sad because I'm like, I wish I had a mom, like your Korean mom who was like this Korean dad, because you are very similar to my father. My father's a very kind, gentle man. But like, why didn't I have a Korean mom that was like you? And so it would be very hard to watch to reconcile these feelings.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I guess we didn't really finish the sort of origin story, but that just reminds me of like, I wanted to be able to put content out there that first and foremost was authentically me, in a significant way, but then also sort of was able, and I don't want to get into the details, but I've always been fascinated by the concept of like having one thing contain multiple layers of information that like different people can watch the same thing. It's like art, right? Like standing in front of a painting and sort of finding yourself focusing on different things because you have different life experiences, and just even where you're standing in the museum can sort of change, your experience. And so I wanted it to sort of have multiple layers of information. I wanted to kind of almost be like kind of goofy and happy-go-lucky, kind of thing. I wanted there to be a layer of, for instance, it's a little like almost like an Easter egg thing. I shared that one of the reasons I say, hey, I'm your Korean dad at the beginning is that then no one can ask me, what country do you come from? What kind of Asian are you?
It'd be funny if you're like China.
I took. Oh, it still happens from time to time. In the comments, but that's a little bit of that's informed by a lot of pain growing up. In the 70s and 80s into the 90s, and being told like, "What's Korea? You must be from China or Japan. Which one? I demand that you tell me which one of those two." Kind of thing. And so, yes, maybe it's like declaring it, being loud and proud. I'm Korean, but the I'm your Korean dad, that your part for me was sort of like in many ways the most important part. It's me offering myself up to the viewer on a platform where everyone else is like, look at me, look at me, look at me. Not everybody, but a lot of people are, because that's what you think you're supposed to do, what people think it's for. And I've always found myself intellectually and emotionally looking for like, what's the, going against the flow? What's the opportunity to sort of differentiate? That's always been, kind of part of who I am. And it's inspired a lot of other people. I don't want to say copycats because they're not copying what I do, but they have taken what I do and then adapted it to their own sort of sense of identity and who they are and who they want to speak to. And, speaking candidly, I've seen it done really well. I've seen it done really poorly. I've seen it done in ways where it's really about, I can see this pain that person carries. And it's not about offering something up to other people in a parenting way. It's more like this inner child inside of themselves is kind of crying out, and has almost created this imaginary sort of figure. And so it makes sense that a lot of people wonder, for me, when they look at my content, like, well, what's your deal? Like, did you have a terrible parent and this is you reparenting yourself? All this sort of stuff. For me, it's really an extension of how I've always been a parent to my children. I have two kids, they're 20 and 18 years old. And, for me, everything that always happens, and I've had to do some like therapy and work about this, but like anything that would happen, like I would instantly go inward for just a split second and go, what's my job here? Like, what's my role? Yeah. Do I need to jump in there? Do I need to refrain? Do I need to stay silent? Do I need to speak up? Kind of thing. And what's the right answer? And in a lot of ways, it's a burden I carry, but also I feel like it is in many ways like a gift that I have. And so, putting it out there, and just like most content creators, they don't know if they're going to go viral or not. They don't know what's going to work. A lot of people hope so, but for me, it was more like, here's something to put out there, and if people like it, great. If not, that's okay too. Like, it's more about just me putting myself out there in a way that feels real. And yeah, when stuff started taking off, like I was as bewildered as anybody else.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. That's pretty wild.
But also there was like all that thought behind it. So for me, I think the bewildering part was not that I went viral. It was that people got it. And I think there was something, I don't want to say it's healing because it wasn't really about me in that way, but there was something that was an interesting, unexpected validation that people seemed to kind of get it and connect with it in a way, whereas most and that's, I think, part of the leadership part for me is that people think that leadership means like telling people what to do or like like kind of pushing people in a certain direction. But for me, it's like leadership isn't real leadership unless you are kind of asking people to stretch themselves and do things that they didn't know they could do.
Yeah.
And so when I planted myself in this sort of proverbial no man's land, and then all these people kind of come in that direction, like that's where I was like, whoa, like, okay, this is something.
Well, I mean, I feel like you exactly like what you said that you like putting something out that has one thing that has many layers and perspectives in it. That's exactly what happened. Because like I said, when we first started talking about this, there's such a broad scope of people who really your videos resonated with. It wasn't just Korean people. It wasn't just kids. It wasn't just, like people who had shitty dads. It was like so many different types of people felt like, oh, wow, this means something to me. This speaks to me in a different way, and so many different ways. I love that. That's so cool.
I do think it's great that you talk about therapy, though, because I remember in because we adopted from foster care, in one of our parenting sessions, they said the most profound thing, which was, you cannot expect to parent a child of trauma if you haven't dealt with your own trauma. And I remember looking at my husband going, oh, shit. Like, I better jump back in that therapy room again.
Some people think of it like, speaking of musicals, right? It's like Oliver Twist. It's like, we're a bunch of ragtag ruffians. We all stick together, kind of thing. But no.
Well, and it's so, and so speaking of somebody who once was a foster child and was then adopted, like, yes, my mother did not deal with her trauma. Did not. That's so, oh gosh. And, I don't know if I ever told you this, Heather, but I only found out that I had been in a foster care like years after the fact. I didn't know that until I think it was 2000. Oh gosh, I went to Korea 3 times and I can't remember, but there was one time when I went to the agency office and had them like pull out my file, and that's when I found out. I was well into my late 20s or something, and there was a photo in the file of a woman, and I was like, whoa, what's that? Because there was a translator there with me, and they were like, oh, that was your foster mother. And I'm like, I had a foster mother? I had no idea. But apparently I had been in a foster home. And I asked my parents that. I'm like, did you know that I had been in a foster home? They're like, Oh, no, we didn't know that. They didn't know anything. They didn't know that I was just supposedly left at a train station, that all this stuff happened. They were just like, oh, okay, we got our baby.
Yeah.
And then my mom was like, and we're going to put her in the school talent shows. But yeah, perfect. We can make our performing monkey now. But yeah, I really think that like, oh my gosh, I love so much of what you said. And then this is one of the things that Heather and I were kind of like really trying to figure out. You can set the record straight.
Uh-oh.
So I met your younger daughter. I was thinking that was
Yes.
your older daughter.
That's my
Tell me
young,
her name
young
again.
Penelope.
That's right. Okay. So I met Penelope, and then your older daughter wasn't there. Does she live here in LA?
She's in college outside of New York City right now.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Okay. So are your kids are mixed, right? Are they Hapa or
No, they're Korean.
They're Korean.
Yeah, that's my first marriage.
Okay,
Yeah.
we were totally confused because we were just like, wait, his ex-wife is not Korean. I'm like, no, his daughter looks very Korean. And we were like, wait a minute.
I've been married 2 times.
Okay, we thought maybe
Wow.
you just had like crazy dominant genes.
Yeah, we're like, his genes
way
is
to
crazy.
go, Nick. Way to go. Way to dominate the genes.
Yeah, Koreans don't tend to dominate things, but there, you came out on top.
Because I saw a picture of your ex that you formed the Wrecking Ball Coffee with,
Yes.
correct? And I thought that was their mom. And I was just like, no, she's not Korean. I'm like, wow. I'm like, genes better. Like, Nick's got like crazy Korean genes. But okay, that clears it up. Because
Like
we were.
super sperm kind of situation.
like
So then-
you will
then
be
also-
Korean. You're like swimming through.
and that kind of thing, you see that from time to time, right? Like
Very rarely, though.
And that's why you
Like,
talked about it.
We talk about that hoppiness because, like, my
Yeah.
daughter is half white and Heather's half white, and she never gets the whole theme of this podcast, like the
Yeah.
casting notice. She never gets like Korean lady. No,
Right.
I used to get called in on occasion for like Asian, and I would walk in and it's all full-blooded Asians, and I'm like, it's not gonna happen. It's not. In fact, I thought I got cast once in a JCPenney commercial because they were looking for diversity. Like, well, she's Asian, and then it turns out that the JCPenney rep was like, oh, I really wanted somebody Hispanic like me, and I was like, oh. I'm not that.
Right.
And everybody's like, no, she's Korean. And she's like, oh, she doesn't look it.
Yeah, and I've told Heather, like, if I met you without knowing anything about you, I would not have guessed that you were half
No,
Korean.
it's I've been called Hispanic predominantly my entire life, like where Hispanic people will start speaking Spanish to me.
I think that's an LA thing, though. Like, if you had been in Minnesota, people would have just been like, what are you? They wouldn't have
maybe
even
true.
gone there, I don't
But I think it's one of those things that I'm finding that just like, there's the whole thing about how like Asian people can kind of tell sort of Asians apart kind of thing. Some people can.
You can't?
And some people can't, have a harder time with that. And for that matter, like just like a lot of things that we talk about regarding identity, I'm going to keep bringing the keyword back, identity and things like that once you start looking for it and really sort of leaning into the idea of like, mixed Asian people are out there and I'm encountering more and more who, whereas before maybe it was like a little bit like, I don't know about my culture, like who cares, kind of thing. And more people who are embracing their Asian identity, that I find myself like, well, I have work to do then. I need to be able to do a little bit better about seeing people for who they are and who they want to be seen as. And I think, there's a little bit of progress. I think we can do better. It's not as hard as people think,
I know, right?
Yeah.
It should be simpler.
I think it just I think people, and maybe I'm speaking this for myself too, it's easier when we're comfortable, when we know, because culturally, let's just, we've got stereotypes. That's the word. Because if you go like, oh, you're Japanese, oh, tick, 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 and this is terrible. My mom, I don't know if you've heard this statement, I don't hate Japanese people. I just hate their culture. And that's how I was raised. Like, you can like a Japanese person, but don't like their culture. And my mom had a lot of anger towards it growing up. And again, good reason. We're coming post-occupation, But I find it really like it was something I had
not
to.
necessarily good reason.
But I didn't meet a Japanese like peer until I went to college. And that was a very like, oh, you're Japanese? I know you. I know all what you think and everything. And I think people want to find comfort in thinking that they know, so they know how to deal with a person or deal in a situation. Like,
Right.
I have this knowledge. But the reality is people, even within cultures, are so varied and different and nuanced that you can't stick to that. And we do such a disservice to it.
Well, and of course, as time goes by, even more and more so. And and then in my situation, I feel that this is really common, that many, many transracial adoptees, the majority of them, at least my generation especially, like, we're adopted into white Christian families. And the first racism you experience is in your own household.
Sure.
It's from your family. And I absolutely, that is 100% what happened to me. I mean, I got my own brothers who are all white. Like, even though two of them are adopted too, they used to tease me and ching chong me, and they call me a boat person. And like, they used to, we all had mean nicknames for each other, because that's what just siblings sometimes do.
Sure.
They're just mean to each other. And like, my one brother had buck teeth, so we used to call him Bucky Beaver. We all had mean names for each other, but they used to call me Rice Ball. And they would call me Rice Ball until I would cry. They go, Rice Ball, Rice Ball, Rice Ball, until I would cry and then like run to my room. But that's like the first, like, talking about identity. You grow up thinking like, oh, well, I'm with all these white people, so I must be a white person. But then your own family is calling you racist names and think it's funny. And my mom used to say stuff like, I don't know if I ever told you this one, Heather, but like in my 3rd grade picture, I think I was like blinking or something in my school photo. And like, she said something about my eyes disappearing when I smile.
Oh my gosh.
And then like, I remember the next year, like forcing my eyes really wide open during my school picture because I didn't want to look like too chinky, right?
Yeah.
I just remember being like so self-conscious about it after that. Like, oh my God, my eyes look like super like Asian-y. I need to look more like a white person. So I mean, all of that kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, it does such a number on like what you think like your identity is growing up.
I'm so sorry for those experiences.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I have
crazy.
mine. We carry a lot of pain, and especially into adulthood. I think especially when we have our own kids, there's a lot of like looking at yourself in the mirror and realizing where a lot of things that we, let's say, don't like about ourselves, like where they come from. And so much of it is informed by that racism that we experienced and the way people treated us in that way.
Yeah.
I saw on your Patreon, though I wasn't able to look at the whole post, you do mention, I guess I'm with your first wife, about dealing with a narcissistic personality. My mom, while never been formally diagnosed because she refuses to go to therapy at all, my therapist was like, I think your mom is a narcissist and she's made you her scapegoat. How my father is still with my mom. They're still married, and he is a hardcore enabler. Did you find yourself being an enabler and you had to kind of have a wake-up moment? Or was it sort of from the start you were like, this is not the kind of person that I want to be with and be, co-parenting in a marital relationship?
I'm a little hesitant to get into it too much, just out of respect to the folks. But needless to say, like the whole narcissism thing has emerged kind of into the culture as a talking point, in recent years, and it's been really helpful in terms of understanding, a lot. For me, it's been more like two things. One is about my daughters and trying to help them, deal with certain situations. My partner, Kimmy, she has some important family members who exhibit a lot of sort of narcissistic tendencies. And so she's been an incredible resource. As she's still going through it herself, it's not like she's like figured everything out and then has only words of wisdom. It's like she's going through it at the same time that my daughters are. But what I've found is really interesting is, dealing with a parent is one thing, dealing with a partner is a little bit different. And so there's been a lot of exploration in terms of like what it is that I needed to find healing in, or like develop myself to essentially like love myself enough to believe that I was worthy of the kind of partnership that I craved, desired, and also thought that I could sort of live up to. I made a piece of content recently that is, I always, again, try to find sort of like topics that maybe people haven't talked about before or heard before. And so this idea of like, I think there's such a thing as talent in relationships. I think that
Sure.
it's not popular in our culture. It's just sort of this like every pot has its lid. You got to find, your kind of person kind of thing. But that everything in life involves hard work and talent.
Absolutely, yeah.
The combination of those two things. But when it comes to certain things, some people seem to not believe that. They seem to think that it's not about talent. It's just about like appreciation. Like, oh, well, people go on American Idol and audition and they seem kind of, not very good at singing, but they're like, how dare you tell me I'm not good at singing? Like, no one's allowed to say that, kind of thing. So figuring out a lot of the self-love stuff has been probably the most important personal work that I've been doing recently, and to find myself in a relationship now for almost the last 2 years that it is honestly like everything that I dreamt that a relationship could be.
That's awesome.
A real,
She's the sweetest too. I love meeting her.
Kimmy's incredible.
Oh my gosh.
She's I tell her on a regular basis, she's truly the best person I've ever met in my life.
And
Yeah.
you've
That's
even
awesome.
met me, so that's saying a lot. So, I mean, that's got to be pretty amazing. No, I mean, like, yeah, she just does. I mean, I'll obviously only spent a very brief time with her.
Yeah.
Gosh, what a great person.
I loved seeing,
Yeah.
as these events, you're kind of mingling and walking around. I loved seeing the two of you connect. It made me really
Yeah,
happy.
we just like chatted the whole time before the movie. Just such a nice person, and yeah, you can tell she's just got a light about her that's just open and giving and kind, and isn't it wild that it takes us so long in life to figure that stuff out? I mean, because I also like had a really toxic relationship. I actually had two like right in a row, and they were like a 4-year and a 4-year. And like prior to that, though, I had dated like really nice guys, and I remember. Like, you just have those light bulb moments. I mean, it took me
Sure.
years to figure out, because they always say, like, okay, like in heterosexual relationships, like, oh, you're, kind of like attracted to your father or your mother, right? And my dad's a really nice guy. And so, but also a bit of an enabler, because my mom
Yeah.
was, she's like super into codependency. Like she really wanted my brothers to need her. She wanted her kids to need her, and that's how she felt loved. And so I kind of wasn't the one who fed into that. So I was the one of the siblings who was like the most independent. And so, I wasn't the squeaky wheel. And so my brothers, like, one is still living in my dad's house, and one, they're being financially supported and all that stuff. And I just kind of went off and did my own thing. But like, I mean, the relationships, I remember just feeling like, yeah, I always dated nice guys. I'm still friends with some of the guys I dated in the past. And then I ended up in these two just like crap relationships right in a row. And I remember I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, why did that happen? Why did that happen? And then at one moment, all of a sudden I realized, I was like, oh, I've been dating my brother.
Oh, no.
I didn't really realize like what an impact he had on me when we were siblings growing up. But I really imprinted on him as like this male model of like what I thought I deserved, which was just really not great. And he's still not great. We didn't speak for years, and only reason we kind of started speaking recently was because of my mom's funeral. So, yeah. And then I like that really like just like cracked a lot wide open for me. But then since then I've been single. I mean, I've been single like primarily for like, oh my God, like almost 12 years now. I've dated a little bit, but like, I don't know. I haven't met my Kimmy, that's for sure. It's rough, man. It is hard.
But I
Yeah.
definitely think what, Nick is saying, though, about self-love is so important in that. Like, maybe now that you've had time, Amy, and you're working, to build it, I think if we can self-love, we don't rely on a partner to feed us that part of the love. They can feed us relationship love and, love in a better, special way. If I'm self-fulfilled with myself, then I don't need somebody to fill that, and we can have a better partnership. And I failed in that aspect with my husband for a long time. Like, therapy really made me a better partner because I didn't need him to supply my own feelings.
Right. There's a piece of content that I want to make, and I was trying to find like an animator to partner with. I realized actually yesterday, maybe I should just work on it myself on Procreate on an iPad or something like that. But it's this image of like, when you get into a relationship, you're like two little trees. next to each
Yeah.
other. And the way that a lot of people experience their relationships is that your branches grow into each other and get really tangled up. And then sometimes people say stuff like, I don't know where I end and they begin, and vice versa, and stuff like that. But the problem with that type of enmeshment is that, I don't know if that's the right use of that term, but like being tangled up in that way is that you don't know if you're holding yourself up or holding them up or they're holding you up.
Yeah.
And instead, like, rather than getting emotionally and mentally tangled up in each other in your relationships, to stay separate trees and just kind of hold hands in the middle, and come together, where you meet is very intentional. That difference. But the most important thing is that, like, you can look at each other and see a whole person who is healthy within themselves, and vice versa. And that tanglement is sort of like the "you complete me" sort of version of love, right? It's like the thing that sounds really romantic at first, but it's actually very toxic.
Yeah.
It's which is every like rom-com, it's based on that.
Yeah.
And again, like back to identity, it's about retaining your own identity.
Yes.
And being able to coexist rather than losing yourself. And that's, I mean, traditionally what happened to women for so long, losing their identities in marriages.
Right.
Because the man went off and had a life and had a career and had buddies and did all this stuff, and the woman was just like, who am I? Like, I'm just, all I am is like a baby maker, and then I'm like a child raiser, and I do all the laundry, and I cook, I do everything, give to everybody else in this family, and then their kids grow up and they have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
But now it's happening to everybody. I feel like it's happening to men too. So I mean that is like all, again, like back to identity of not losing your sense of self and knowing who you are, that self-love. It's so important in a relationship.
Yeah, you remind me so much of Khalil Gibran. The Prophet is like one of the most important books I've ever read. I think everybody should read it. But I remember we read a passage on marriage at our wedding, and it always stuck out to me because he talks about in it that in a marriage you should be like the pillars of a temple, holding up the same ideals, but you stand apart from each other, not together. And there needs to be space. So you are individuals, but with the same ideals in mind. But I wasn't that good in the beginning.
So you and Bobby have separate bedrooms now? Is that what you're saying?
I know. We sometimes, I'm like, though his snoring is now my white noise machine, so I can't sleep without it. But it is that idea of like having the independent ideas. I have a very good husband. I said, Amy and I want to do a podcast. And he's like, all right, I'll figure it out. I'll get it all set up. And like, this is what he does. This is his love language. And it's important then when he has his interests, while my love language may not be to understand all these components and buy and build, but to show him I support it. So like, he just bought this brand new camera rig, and I booked a photo tour of the Neon Museum here in Vegas because I said, look, I don't quite understand this equipment, but I want you to see that I know it's important to you, and I want to support what's important to you right now and be there. And I think that we miss that in a lot of relationships. It's like you said, it's this, we're one and the same, we're this and that. And it's like, no, we should be more different in relationships because that makes our relationships bigger and better and stronger and more diverse. And, the reason we adopt animals from mutts and from the streets is because diversity in genetics is great, right? So why isn't diversity in relationships great? Like if you're homogenous, I think it makes you at risk for failure. Like if it's this same all the time.
So much of it's about intentionality, right? Like being very clear, like being able to take inventory of yourself and each other. Like, what do we have going on? Like, what do we need more of? What do we need less of? Kind of thing. But what you were talking about makes me, reminds me that I am in the very sort of early sort of stages of trying to put a book proposal together about, and the subject that I thought that was worth getting into was actually like men and masculinity. That I feel like as much as we talk about gender and toxic masculinity and like alpha male, red pill, whatever kind of stuff out there, that there hasn't really been something for people to kind of coalesce around and kind of get interested in. And I think, for men, they almost need, like, as much as there's the cliche about men not wanting to read the instructions, it's like when they do, it's like, okay, cool, like I can do that. That's in so many ways. And so for me, it's about like, can we lay things out in a way that becomes sort of like a quick sort of framework to think about, not just men and masculinity, but like all people, you know,
Sure.
and how your gender and informs the way that you like engage with the sort of framework of values. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, for your husband or for men, like when they get the camera rig, I think men crave like that's really cool. Like I don't necessarily understand, but like what is it? You know, a little bit of curiosity and interest. You know, like and for that matter, when you mentioned the way that your husband responded to you wanting to do a podcast, it's like this, you know, thing that I don't think people talk about enough. Like men need a job, men need purpose.
Yeah, they
You
do.
know, I mean, we all need purpose,
Yeah.
but for men, it tends to be more like task and sort of like
tangible
job
job,
oriented, you know, and so like so often, I think that like a lot of men who feel sort of sad, it's like they can't find their purpose. They're not, you know, being allowed through their relationships to sort of really like blossom into that sort of role and kind of feel. That's a lot of what makes a man feel like a man, is like being very capable and being able to demonstrate that capability.
Sure.
And
But I think that goes for women too, don't you think? Like,
oh, most definitely.
yeah.
Most
like women
definitely.
also want to show.
Yeah, but I think that like the way that I think gender is part of our identity. It comes again, like you know, part of our identity, obviously, and so it's almost like these sort of like these tubes, or like when I say framework, it's like there's these pathways that different people will use in different ways. But like, you know, to give you a little, I guess, preview, it like for me right now, that framework is this idea of like awareness and capability and like responsibility, like those are the three pillars. And that like the way that each person engages with those things and what those things mean might vary depending on their identity and their personal experience and all that sort of stuff. But that when you put those things together, like that's really sort of when we say value system, it's ultimately like that's the sort of thing that contains our values.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Man, we
It's,
went deep. We've been going deep.
You gotta
on
go
this
deep.
podcast.
No, because like Nick just brings up so many things. Like I remember when we got our son, we went to a theme park and there's a roller coaster. Bobby doesn't like loops because they fuck with his equilibrium and stuff, and he just hates the way it makes him feel. And I remember our son, I was like, oh, I'll go on it with you. And he goes, so wait a minute, you're supposed to be the man, pointing at Bobby. And he goes, you're supposed to be brave. And we had to explain to him, going on a roller coaster doesn't make you brave. You know, and bravery doesn't define men versus women, you know, and really he had a little machismo thing that came from his trauma background, and really had to work with him over the years of the idea, because my husband's not like a sports guy. He's not, if you meet him, you'll see. He's not like into athletics and all those things, but he's learned as a dad to be supportive of his son who is. And I think that he's actually modeling like great parenting to him, in that men can come in different ways. They can be artistic, they can be very soft, very tender, but the key to being a good father is being supportive of your child and enthusiastic when they're enthusiastic.
Yeah.
You know, if you love bowling, I'm going to love it too. My kids bowl. Yeah. They bowl a lot. We got bowling today. But
Bowling
like,
scholarships.
it's for girls especially, but it's very, I think that was such a difference from what I had. You know, I had a father who was in the entertainment industry, he was a writer, and who really naysayed me wanting to go into entertainment at all. And you just wonder what differences would I have had if I had had one who got enthusiastic about it, the way you are enthusiastic with Aubrey. You know, and her music
what?
and
It's
stuff.
interesting that you say that, because you know, for listeners who are not aware, my daughter played Lily on Modern Family for 9 seasons, and it was never my intention to get her into acting. I was an actor for many years before I even thought of having a child, and it just kind of happened. It sort of fell into our laps, and like all of a sudden, I was signing a network contract for her. So that's how that happened. But I remember I had this moment of like, when, like when she was really little on the show, she was just kind of going through the motions. I would help her say the lines. She would just sort of parrot the lines and she'd hit her mark. She was just smart enough that she was able to just kind of take to it and do it with no training, no background in it. But as she got better and better, I remember just watching her just really nail this very difficult thing they wanted her to do. I don't remember specifically what it was, but it was a scene where they were really asking a lot of her. And it was the first time I really saw her act. Like she wasn't just saying lines, but she really like understood the emotion of the scene, and she really went there and she did it well and she hit her mark. I mean, I was just like, wow. And I remember I had like a little mini breakdown, like watching it in the monitors, because I remember feeling like, man, just think like what I could have done if my parents had been more supportive. And my parents were never like, oh, you can't do anything, but they just were like not there, and they didn't. And I was definitely told like, this is your lane, stay in it. Yeah. Right. I was very limited. Like, this is what you could be good at. This is what girls are capable of. And this is where you should be. And I remember feeling like, definitely growing up very limited. Like, well, I never even imagined that I could be a comedian, like that was somebody's job, or that I could be an actor. I mean, I just thought like music. That's why I went into music, because I thought that's all that I could do. Because my mom had been like sort of an aspiring musician and singer. So I was like, well, I guess this is all I am capable of. I guess I'll just major in this.
Yeah.
And then I got to my junior year, and I was like, I don't even want to do this. What am I doing?
Doing this.
And then I married somebody that I didn't want to be married to. And then it was just like a chain of like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing these things? It took me well into my late 20s to even begin to examine why I was making these choices.
And I think that's what's beautiful about your Korean dad, is that it does break down all these barriers and ideas of what's a dad supposed to be, what's a Korean supposed to be, what's a man supposed to be, and I think that that's part of the really positive, why I'm very hopeful for society in the future, is that we are getting to this idea of we don't have to be what society and the media has told us we have to be. We don't have to follow that lane that they've put us in. And I think creators like you are doing such an excellent job of saying, I made a new lane. I broke through the guardrails, and now I've ventured my own path. And I think that's so important to the development of the youth in this society and society in general.
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback, emails, direct messages, stuff like that, like every day. And yeah, like people have sent me messages saying like, you got me through a really tough time. Or, sometimes they'll say stuff like I don't know if I'd be here if not for you and your content. And I don't really understand what they're saying, like telling me. I don't understand. I don't know how to take that, like, because what I don't do is like feel like, pat myself on the back, like, yeah, glad you got to meet me, kind of situation. It's more, it's a mystery, and that's okay. What I do know is that I've been so inspired by so many people in my life, especially when I was younger. And I have like people who are my mentors who really taught me how to think and how to question. And that in many ways, like our role, if you feel so called to be, like if this fits you, that, there are a lot of people out there who are meant to sort of disturb us out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
Like so many of the things that we've been talking about today that represent like painful experiences is that people sort of settle into their comfort zone and they want to stay there. And so as a young person, I told myself like, there's a certain kind of comfort that obviously we all need, but I'm really going to do my best to sort of lean into the discomfort, which in turn sort of is a very Korean thing to do, like in a lot of ways, but doing it like opting in. And that's my privilege, right? Like my privileged experience is to be able to choose to lean into it. My father was a medical doctor. My mother was a school teacher, but she was a stay-at-home mom. And we grew up in an affluent suburb outside of Washington, D.C. And, I recognize that privilege a lot. A lot of my friends' parents were like the 100 hours a week at the liquor store, type of Korean American kind of family experience. And so, like what given what I've been given and the experiences and opportunities, like what is my best way not to give back? Like that to me feels too generic. For me, it's like, where is my discomfort that I can feel comfortable with?
Yeah.
Where's my comfortable discomfort that will push me in a way that makes me feel like, I'm doing good by people and giving folks the best that I have.
Yeah, I think that's so great. I mean, I remember my therapist saying you need to learn to sit in your discomfort, accept the discomfort for what it is, because then you can actually process and move through it.
Yeah.
If we avoid, then we'll never address it.
The flip side of that, the other extreme, the other sort of like electrified rail is when you think that you deserve to only be uncomfortable.
True.
Yeah.
Kind of thing too, which is something that I've had to address in my life too.
Interesting. I hate being uncomfortable.
It's very American. Americans, like, we love. I don't know how you said you visited Korea. Like, when you leave the U.S., I always say, like, there's a few things that jump out at you. Number one, like, Americans love our ice in our drinks.
Oh my God.
Like everywhere else you go, you like
Nuts
ask
in
for
Europe
ice,
and
they give
Asia,
you
yeah.
one ice cube. And you look back at them and like, are you kidding me? It's 100 degrees outside. They're like 100 Celsius. That's not possible. Kind of thing. So ice, air conditioning, right? Like,
I have one to add.
everywhere else you
Yeah.
go, there's not the kind of air conditioning blasting everywhere that you go, except for in the U.S. And I mean, I guess it's mostly those two things.
Oh, I have one to add
Yeah.
to it. And this is more an Asian thing, but like pretty much all Asian places I've been to, all Asian countries, napkins.
Oh yeah. Oh, big time.
Okay, because Aubrey and I, we use cloth napkins here because we're like, one thing that I hate is waste. I hate waste. So, like we use like cloth napkins. We hardly use paper towels. Like I buy one Costco thing of paper towels and it lasts us forever. Like we use like cloth to clean things and stuff. But like we go through tons of tissues because we both have allergies and our noses always run when we eat. We're like, who are people who don't have to blow their nose like all throughout their meal, which I know is really gauche in Korean society. But like we need napkins all the time when we're eating if we're out. And like we just went to Thailand over the holidays. We're like, we need to blow our noses. Help us. They don't give you any napkins, or if they do, it's like a square of toilet paper.
It's like
It looks like a square of toilet paper, and
Yeah.
you're like, this is it for my whole
It's like a
meal?
it's like sometimes it's like literally a Kleenex.
It is, yeah. Or they'll have on the table a thing of toilet tissue.
Right.
And that's what you're supposed to use for your napkins. And we're just like, what is happening here? But yeah, we're like, you know what? We're going to deal with it. Like,
Yeah, where's the queen size blanket that I get at my local,
yeah, but then like but it drives me nuts. Like here, like you go, like even there, like we went to a KFC, they don't have a thing of napkins out for you to just grab
Right.
a million
Yeah.
napkins, which is what Americans do. There's a napkin dispenser and they take like a pile of napkins and then they use like one or two. There you have to ask for it if you really want one, and then they give you a toilet tissue square.
Sure,
So
yeah.
you just kind of live with it.
Single,
so yeah.
single-use disposables. Yeah, a lot less.
It's so true. Well, we should probably. This has been amazing. You're just
Yeah,
fantastic.
you're
Thank you
awesome.
so much for
Oh my
being
goodness,
here.
I'm
and
so glad to be here with
I
both
love this.
of you.
We have a question that we like to ask
Oh
everybody.
yes, I love these.
So our question for every guest that we have on is, if they were to make a feature film about the Nick Cho story, who would play you? And you could, it doesn't have to be your race or even your gender. You can go all out there, like somebody who embodies your identity. If
They
you
don't
could
even have to
pick-
be alive anymore.
Yeah, it could be someone dead.
That's really hard.
Who would it be?
It's hard for me to say this out loud without sounding like I'm full of myself. But like, I don't.
go
I haven't
there.
met anyone that I can relate to in that way, or seen anybody. And I'm not really entirely sure why. I haven't really sort of thought about it that much.
I'm trying to think of somebody who would be
Yeah.
good to play Nick in the Nick Cho story.
I get like, people I've looked like from time to time, like in comments and things like that, but I don't get it. Like, there are people who've said that my voice sounds like Patton Oswalt's
Oh
voice.
yeah.
Oh,
I can
Which
hear
I
it.
can
I
see
don't
that.
really understand.
Oh,
I-
I hear
I-
it.
I
I hear
hear
it
it,
now that
yeah.
you said it.
I posted a clip to Twitter, and Patton Oswalt replied and was like, "I don't get it either," kind of thing.
Okay, you're both delusional because I
But-
do hear it.
so there's that, like, I in my professional career, random strangers would come up to me and ask me if I was Bobby Lee,
Oh God.
Oh my gosh.
which is really funny. And then now there's this guy who I don't really know very much about named Markiplier. He's like an internet person that like Gen Z people know.
I've heard it, yeah, but I don't.
Markiplier?
Yeah, I think he's actually like mixed Asian.
Oh, I don't know.
Asian and white. I mean, to me, like he looks very handsome in his big, like kind of long flowing hair. So I'm like, oh yes, sure, that's exactly me. You know, kind of thing. He looks like this weird sort of like masculine filtered version of me, a little bit. But I don't know. That's a hard one. I want to give you an answer, but I don't know. That's a hard one.
For me, I get very Jimmy Stewart vibes. Like
Jimmy
Mr.
Stewart.
Smith Goes to Washington, you know,
nice. Classy.
the classy, kind-hearted man who just wants better for society.
Yay! Why?
awesome.
Are we done? Should we be done?
Honestly, if
I
I
think we
had my
should be
way, I'd be
done.
like, we would never be done. I would be in LA. We would go out to Myung Ying Dumplings right now.
I know,
Have,
because I literally feel like we could just talk forever. Like,
yeah, you've been fantastic, Nick.
but
I
then it
appreciate
would be the
so
worst
much.
podcast. We talked forever. Yeah, like thank you so much
thank you
for
for
your
having
time and for all of your just wonderful things you said. So much insight and interesting things. Thank you to Nick Cho for being here on Casting Notice podcast. Your socials, I think we all know, it's Your Korean Dad on. It's different on Instagram and
Your
you
Korean
can
Dad
say-
on TikTok and YouTube, and then everywhere else it's Nick Cho.
Nick Cho,
And
yes.
I see KCHO.
Yay. Well, check him out if you haven't seen his videos. They're definitely worth your time. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
with
so
us
much.
today.
Yes,
Thank you so much. Glad you got to talk to me.
I am 100%.
Next week's our last episode of season 1. What? I know. I can't believe it either. Well, you're not going to want to miss it because we're going to tell you about our plans and we're going to air some of our outtakes from our episodes that didn't quite make it to the final cut.